Fight fans, we're back. Monday morning Matchmaker podcast, although it is Thursday here on the MMA Today podcast network. For the UFC, they got Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard, VPs of Talent Relations. Here at MMA Today, we got the two guys coming to you today. Max Freedman, Trademark MMA. I'm joined by a great mind, Jordan Colbert, Jay Colbert, MMA. Jordan, it was a crazy weekend of fights, but how you doing this afternoon? You ready to talk some matchmaking?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, I'm ready to go. This is my favorite thing to do as far as MMA goes, the matchmaking stuff. So let's get started, my man.
Looking forward to it. So let's start with Friday night, the Ultimate Fighter finale. Now, the main event winner, Israel Adesanya, great performance there. That was a lot of feature on the Tough Guys podcast with John Franklin, as well as Sunday Morning Cornerman with John Franklin, Tony Fagnano on the MMA Today podcast network. A lot of talk online about him going against Paulo Borrachinha, Costa, the winner of UFC 226 matchup against Uriah Hall. I'm going to come out and say it. I don't like that matchup. I want to get your take, though, Jordan. You got a great mind for the matchmaking process. Who do you think's next for Israel Adesanya?
Yeah, thank you, Max. I got to say I agree with you. I don't like the Paulo Borrachinha matchup. I feel like those are middleweights, two of their top prospects right now. And just in a division that you see Yoel Romero leaving and a lot of the top guys getting older, I don't think they should cross paths quite yet. The guy that I have Adesanya coming up against next is Derek Brunson. They had a little back and forth on social media there, and I think that's a great next step for Adesanya to see if he's ready to take that leap into the top 5 to 10 guys.
Yeah, great point. They already exchanging words on social media. Big personalities there, could probably build a fight real easily. I'm pretty intrigued by a matchup with Antonio Carlos Jr., a guy that really has a strong wrestling and jiu-jitsu pedigree. I think one more specialty test for Israel Adesanya to pass before he really gets in the upper echelon of the division, but wouldn't mind seeing that Derek Brunson fight, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I like that fight too. Jiu-jitsu specialist. We haven't really seen too much of Adesanya off his back. He got taken down briefly in the fight before Tavares, but Carlos Jr. is a different animal when he's on top, so I think that's a great one too.
Both great matchups. Now, two champions of the Ultimate Fighter finale were crowned. The first being Mike Trizano, fighting out of Team Tiger Schulman's in New York. Now, he won the show at lightweight, although most of his career has been fought at featherweight. So there are two options here. One, maybe you got a lightweight he might want to take on in his first fight after the show, and maybe one featherweight if he does decide to go back to his natural weight class.
Yeah, Mike Trizano, good prospect, 7-0, I believe. Very well-rounded, can strike with the best, can grapple with the best. I'm anxious to see what he has next. But as far as lightweight goes, if he decides to stick there, I like a matchup with Marco Pollo Reyes. A middling guy, but an exciting guy. And usually with these tough guys, even if they win the show, they like to ease them along. And I feel like that's a good match to kind of see where he's at and see if he's truly ready to kind of get plunged into one of the deepest divisions in the UFC.
Yeah, great matchup. Marco Polo Reyes coming off a huge win in St. Louis in January over Matt Frivola. Did test positive for a performance-enhancing drug, but that has not been clarified yet whether he was found guilty or not, so just temporarily suspended. We'll see how that plays out. How about if 145? Should Trizano go back down?
One matchup, I was looking through the roster, and one matchup that I thought sounded super interesting is versus Dan Ige or IJ. I'm not sure how to say his last name. Good prospect, though. Another going right up there with Trizano. I feel like both guys have it in them to be contenders down the road. Maybe a little too early to see them matched up together, but I think it would be exciting.
Yeah, Danny Ige, he steamrolled Mike Santiago, the hometown favorite, UFC 225 in Chicago. I love that matchup, too. That'd be exciting. But both guys young and up and coming. I would match up Mike Trizano with Wong Guan at 145 pounds. He has only one fight against Alex Caceres, maybe a little underestimated in his first fight, but a well-rounded guy with a lot of experience. I think you throw him into a deep water, give him a veteran of the sport right off the bat, and see kind of how he handles that test. But either way, I'm looking forward to seeing Mike Trizano fight in the UFC later down the road.
It's a good matchup. I like it. Sorry, just to piggyback off of that, Wang Guan, man, he came in and he straight blasted Alex Caceres. He's a very good striker, and I got to say I'd love to see that matchup.
Yeah, would definitely and welcome that piece of matchmaking there. Now at 145 pounds, a kind of a similar situation here. Brad Katona wins the Ultimate Fighter, fighting at featherweight, although all of his career fights prior have been at bantamweight. And already on Twitter, he said he's most likely to go back down to his natural weight class of 135 pounds. Jordan, what do you got for Brad Katona at bantamweight, 135 pounds.
For Brad Katona, I like him versus a guy coming off of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, but we haven't seen him since. Boston Salmon. Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series has kind of gotten a lot of the shine lately. Kind of taken over tough. We might see the last season here up and coming with the heavyweights and the women's featherweights. But two very sound prospects, Katona coming out of, I believe it's SBG Ireland, correct?
Yep.
And Boston Salmon, who's a prospect that people have been talking about in the regional circuit for a very long time. Haven't seen him yet. I think he's had some nagging injuries. But I'm looking forward to seeing him back in there. And Brad Katona would be a very tough test for him.
That'd be a fun fight for sure. Both really hungry, young, up-and-coming guys. Boston Salmon hinting on Twitter that he has a fight lined up, so we'll see if that materializes too. But I love that matchup. That'd be a fun one to watch. I think Brad Katona, a good first test for him, coming off a win. Guido Canetti, an Ultimate Fighter, Latin America Season 1, just picked up his first UFC win in over 3 years. This past, I believe, May over Diego Rivas. That was in Santiago, Chile. Would love to see just Brad Katona go against a guy who's had multiple UFC fights and really see how he handles that first test. Moving down the card here, a couple of women's 125-pound flyweight fights. Man, Roxanne Modafferi took Barb Honchak to school. Very dominant performance there. Roxanne Modafferi on kind of a career resurgence here. A lot of talk about her on the Women's MMA podcast on the MMA Today podcast network. Jordan, as she moves up in the ranks, what do you like for Roxy?
Yeah, she looked awesome against Barb, man. It was a really great fight to watch. She was a favorite coming into her season of Tough. Just because of her background, she's been a part of the women's MMA scene for a very long time. And like you said, a complete career turnaround resurgence. I'd like to see her up against Sijara Eubanks next. Another girl, she was a finalist. They actually fought in the Tough House. But I'd like to see them go in the official UFC octagon. They're both right on the cusp right there in a very new division of being a contender to the title. I think the winner of that fight could be next in line, actually.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Jara Eubanks at 2, Roxanne Modafferi at 4. A very close fight on the Ultimate Fighter. That's a great matchup. Should that not materialize, I think the winner of Caitlin Chukagian and Alexis Davis, that could be another number 1 contender matchup for Roxanne Modafferi as champion Nico Montano takes on Valentina Shevchenko coming up. The other women's flyweight fight, great battle there at 125 pounds. Some of the younger names up and coming. Montana De La Rosa cracks the rankings with her win over Rachel Ostovich-Berdon. What do you think of De La Rosa's performance, and who do you like for her to fight next?
Man, I thought she looked really good. Another up-and-comer. I think she has potential to be a top 10 fighter in the division for quite a while, in such a new division especially. I'd like to see De La Rosa up against Ashley Evans-Smith next, who's kind of had an up-and-down career inside the UFC, trying to reinvent herself in this new division. Got a win under her belt in the new division. And, I'd like to see that one next. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Evan Smith, a fun fighter to watch and picked up her first win in the new weight class. With the name kind of she carries from the 135-pound class, I kind of look to see maybe she gets a higher profile fight in her next fight, but definitely would welcome a battle with Montana De La Rosa. The fighter I have an eye on is 2 slots ahead of her, Mara Romero Barella. I believe she is from Italy. She had a very impressive UFC debut against Kalindra Faria. Fell a little short in her second UFC outing against Caitlin Chukagian, but Chukagian, a very sound fighter coming out of the Northeast there. Either way, though, I think we both agree Montana De La Rosa showing some growth in her game and really excited to see what the future holds for her.
Very solid fighter.
So, yeah, moving along this Ultimate Fighter finale card here, Alessio Di Chirico taking out Julian Marquez in a fight that really seemed tailor-made for Marquez. Marquez missed weight, too. Di Chirico now, 2 straight wins. The knockout over Oluwale Bamboshe, then followed up with this decision win over Julian Marquez. What's next for him in the middleweight division?
Yeah, Alessio, he really seems to be finding his stride in the UFC's middleweight division, putting together back-to-back wins now. I don't think he's sitting at the top 15 yet. I'm probably going to take another fight or 2, maybe even 3 for him to get to that point. But a fight I like for him is Gerald Meerschaert, another one who just fought. Another guy coming off of back-to-back wins. I believe it to be in the same place in that middleweight division as Alessio. I think a win for either guy kind of puts them in that conversation to, okay, maybe this guy can be something, you know?
He took the words right out of my mouth. That was my matchup as well. Gerald Meerschaert, Rufus Sport, trained middleweight, very highly decorated grappler. faced some adversity early on in his fight against Oscar Picota, but came back with a really strong flurry in the second round to get the finish. That's a great bit of matchmaking. Now, on the flip side of things, Julian Marquez, a guy they were really pushing, he stumbles a little bit here. He not only misses weight, but loses the fight. What's next for the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series celebrity?
Yeah, man. Julian Marquez quickly becoming a fan favorite in that middleweight division. He comes to bang, throws heavy leather. A fight I like with him is against another Tuesday Night Contender Series 11, Carl Robertson. Maybe a little bit too early for a matchup like this, being they're both still so fresh inside of the UFC and highly touted coming off of Dana's little project. But I just think it's too good of a matchup to pass up right now. Both coming off of their first loss inside of the UFC. I say make it happen.
Yeah, as we know, the UFC brass does tend to follow that win-win, loss-loss pattern, but we definitely have seen otherwise. A fight I like for Julian Marquez is John Phillips, SPG Ireland, stumbled in his first UFC outing against Charles Byrd, just completely outclassed, gotten taken down, pretty much dominated on the ground, submitted late in the first round, I believe. And just thinking about the two styles of those two fighters, man, they would go to war. They would absolutely go to war. So that would be a really fun fight to watch.
I like that one a lot.
Now, one of the names on this card making a whole lot of waves, Violent Bob Ross, Luis Pena, medically disqualified on The Ultimate Fighter. Really unfortunate because we saw his first fight against Jose Martinez on the show, really showed a lot of promise, but then a broken foot took him out of the competition. He took on Richie Smolin, his teammate from the show, also medically uncleared to continue on The Ultimate Fighter. And, man, it was a dominant performance from Luis Pena. And he really seems to be enjoying himself, soaking in all the media, doing a lot of interviews and whatnot. Seems like he has a high potential and a high ceiling, now training in American Kickboxing Academy. Does the UFC have a promising young talent here, Jordan? And if so, how do they treat that? Who do they put him in there against next?
I got to say, Max, I truly think that they do have a potential star in Violent Bob Ross. He looked great on the show. Sucks he had to have that injury, but he looked even better in the finale. You can see the growth. I like the move to American Kickboxing Academy. I think it's going to be a great camp for him. I like him against a name a lot of people might not be familiar with, but Don, I think it's Madge, coming over from South Africa, a highly touted Muay Thai guy. Striking coach for a lot of other UFC fighters coming up. He's nothing but excitement in there if you've seen his fights on the regional circuit. Really, really good striker. Mediocre record, but I think he's more than that. And I think a fight with him and Pena would make for fireworks.
Yeah, Don Madge, man, talk about an exciting striker. And if Luis Pena didn't have enough violence in his first fight, that would definitely bring a lot of attention. Don Madge, I believe he's one of the primary sparring partners for Chris Cyborg, UFC featherweight champion. Really highly decorated striker. It'll be interesting to see kind of who he gets matched up with. One of the names that came to mind for me was Dan Moret because, yes, he's only 0-1, but had a very solid showing against Gilbert Burns in his UFC debut. 16-fight veteran over the regional scene, fought a lot in LFA. I think it's a good, solid test for Luis Pena, and if he's able to kind of stifle the well-rounded game of Dan Moret, then he could really put himself in position for another big fight.
I like that one.
Yeah. Wrapping up the Ultimate Fighter finale, Bryce Mitchell and Tyler Diamond both went to war. Could have gone either way. 145-pound guys. I really hope the UFC keeps them both around. Mitchell's hand was raised. Who does he get next?
I was having trouble coming up with a fight for this one. To be honest, I wasn't a big fan of the fight. I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the fights on the finale card. So I opted to just give him another newcomer. No one actually signed to the UFC yet. I think with a lot of these tough guys, especially the ones that aren't in the finale fight, a lot of the times this is what they do is they give them newcomers or they give them short notice fights against other newcomers coming into the UFC. So that's what I opted to do is just give him any newcomer coming into the UFC kind of on a level playing field.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. And I see where you're coming from there, a young up-and-coming talent. I really liked what I saw out of Diamond late in the fight, but it might have been just a little too late. He was behind on the judges' scorecards. One name that comes to mind was who also competed that night, Steven Peterson, Ocho, picking up his first UFC win, another big win for the surging Fortis MMA in Dallas. Just a tough, durable, go for broke type of fighter. And that's what you get with Bryce Mitchell too. I think those two could really have a fun barn burner of a clash in that cage.
I like it.
All right, well, let's shift gears here. The big UFC 226 fight card went down Saturday night. It appears that Now double champion Daniel Cormier likely going to be matched up against Brock Lesnar. We're not going to touch that. It's really been up for debate on many other podcasts and other media outlets here. I do want to get your take on the former champion, Stipe Miocic. A tough loss for him. Speaking freely, I think he would be deserving of an all-immediate title rematch, but whether he gets that is up for debate here. What do you got for Stipe Miocic?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think he's been the most dominant heavyweight champ in UFC history. I think an immediate rematch is not out of the question. It just doesn't look like it's going to happen with Daniel Cormier's timetable for retirement. So a fight I like next for him is another up-and-coming guy in Curtis Blades. He wants that title shot. I don't think he's going to get it given that Cormier is going to be fighting Brock Lesnar, and I don't think he's interested in the Curtis Blades matchup post-Brock Lesnar. So Curtis is definitely going to have to fight one more time. A fight with a former champion, the most dominant champion in Stipe Miocic, will definitely secure him that shot. So I like that fight next. Two very, very talented wrestlers.
Yeah, and with this top of the food chain being this DC Brock Lesnar matchup, it really clouds the gates for guys like Curtis Blades, guys like Alexander Volkov, really who have made a run towards the top and now don't have that opportunity to really establish themselves as the number one contender. Stipe Miocic, I think he goes against Derek the Black Beast Lewis coming off the win. They're both still in the top five. Derek Lewis, an uneventful win, if you will, over Francis Ngannou. Nonetheless, his hand was raised. Winner of that fight, then you kind of see, well, Stipe gets by the Black Beast. Maybe he gets his immediate title rematch then. But Curtis Blades, man, Stipe Miocic, that's got me salivating, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like that matchup as well.
Now, Derek Lewis, then, if you don't have him fighting Stipe Miocic, what do you like for the Black Beast?
For Derek Lewis, kind of in a difficult spot right now. The fight with Ngannou was very, very puzzling. A lot of people had that pegged as possibly the most violent heavyweight fight in UFC history. Didn't play out that way in the slightest bit. I like him against Alexander Volkov next. Maybe late this year, early 2019. I know he has some back injuries that he needs to get sorted out still, ongoing back injuries, but Volkov is up there. He wants a title shot as well. I don't think he gets it either. He's going to have to win one, maybe two more. But a fight against the number 2 heavyweight in Derek Lewis will definitely help his case.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that. Definitely wouldn't hate a Volkov-Derek Lewis matchup. Now, Derek Lewis picks up the win over Francis Ngannou. Like you said, touting as one of the most violent fights in UFC history. Could not have been more wrong. Could have been the complete opposite. Francis Ngannou now drops to number 4. For him, it's tough because it really seems like the Stipe Miocic loss has affected him mentally. And Joe Rogan said on the podcast, on the broadcast, that he seems like he needs a sports psychologist or something to really clear his mind. So for him, I kind of like some time off, and then perhaps the winner of the upcoming fight between Marcin Tybura and Stefan Struve, guys that Ngannou has not fought yet. Both those, one of the winner of that fight will move up in the rankings a little bit closer to Francis Ngannou, who's coming off 2 losses. I think that fight probably makes a whole lot of sense because right behind him is Volkov, who's absolutely surging. Then Alistair Overeem, who he's already knocked out. Mark Hunt already booked as well to fight. So looking forward to seeing the winner of that fight and as Francis Ngannou's next opponent. What about you? Who's next for the monster Ngannou?
Yeah, Max, Francis Ngannou, that's such an interesting case, right? The term life-changing beatdown kind of comes to mind. He just completely did a 180 from the fighter that we knew going into the Stipe Miocic fight. I like a fight with up-and-comer, a guy who has looked really good in the UFC so far, violent dude, Tai Tuivasa. I believe Tai Tuivasa is a guy that's going to force him to engage. Even if he wants to be tentative, Tai's not going to let him be tentative. And I think if Ngannou can truly get his hands dirty in a fight like that, a fight where he's going to be forced to throw heavy leather, I think he can get that mentality back because Tai's just going to come straight forward.
That's a fun fight to think about. And Tai Tuivasa, man, after his win over Andrei Arlovski, he's there. And in an aging heavyweight division, it's exciting to think about a young rising talent like Tai Tuivasa and how far he can go. And man, if he knocks off Francis Ngannou in his next fight, put him right in the mix with Blades, Volkov, and Miocic for that next crack at the heavyweight title.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I would love to see that fight headline the Adelaide card, I believe, in December. I would love that.
Oh, yeah. Great thought there. UFC returning to the land down under in December. Tai Tuivasa could really pack the house there. Third fight on the UFC 226 main card. Not a lot of folks saw this coming. Anthony Showtime Pettis, perhaps one of his best performances in his entire UFC career, man. Really picked apart Michael Chiesa, and then once the fight hit the ground, a really beautiful sequence to submit Michael Chiesa, a very talented grappler too. Anthony Showtime Pettis really establishes himself back in the lightweight division rankings, moving up 4 slots to number 8. Jordan, Anthony Showtime Pettis, is he for real? Is he finally back? And if so, what do we got next for Showtime?
Is Anthony Pettis truly back? It's hard to say. I'd like to see him back in there against another stiff test. He had a great performance against Chiesa, though. He came in overweight. Chiesa did. It didn't matter to Pettis, though. Pettis truly dominated that fight, picked him apart, and then submitted him off his back. A fight I like next for Pettis would be a fight with the winner of Justin Gaethje and James Vick. I think that fight is just a barn burner matchup, whichever way you go. If it's Gaethje, we know what happens when Gaethje gets in the octagon. And James Vick is another exciting guy too. His fights are very seldom a bore. So I think Pettis matches up really well with both of them. And this is a fight that gets him back on track and possibly to be called a contender again.
Yeah, well, if Anthony Pettis keeps putting performances like this together, he'll be back in the title contention within no time. And this fight really seemed like a tough matchup for him. And man, did he impress with flying colors. It's hard to know where the UFC stands with Ally Aquinta and where he stands with the UFC, but sitting at 10, Anthony Pettis at number 8, it seems like he wants to come back for bigger profile fights, and a former champion like Pettis might be the type of individual that brings him back. So if that's the case, I like the Ally Aquinta Anthony Pettis fight, but man, the winner of Justin Gaethje, James Vick, and either one of those combatants against Anthony Pettis, that would be a fun one to watch. Now, on the flip side, Michael Chiesa, boy, is his stock fallen. He's had a rough couple years. Since April 2016, has only been in there twice. The controversial loss to Kevin Lee last June of 2017, and now gets submitted here after missing weight against Anthony Pettis, a fight that was rebooked from 3 months ago when the infamous Conor McGregor incident took him out medically uncleared to fight after suffering a cut due to broken glass shards in his forehead. Michael Chiesa now moving up to 170 pounds, already announced it. Right away, it's going to be a tough match. That welterweight division doesn't get any easier. A matchup I like for him is Zach Cummings. Cummings coming off a controversial loss to Michel Prazeres. I think Chiesa gets a win over an established veteran like Cummings, especially if he's able to do it in dominant fashion, then he jumps right into the rankings at 170 pounds. But a lot of other good matchups out there, Jordan. I'm sure you got a different one. Who do you got for Michael Chiesa at 170?
Yeah, Michael Chiesa at 170. It's interesting, man. He's a very big guy when he was in the lightweight division. I'm not sure how he does at welterweight, but I'm excited to see how he does. A fight that I think would be a good one to sort of test the water for him and see where he fits in that division is a fight with Brian Barberena. Yeah, a grinder. Very tough wherever the fight goes. Isn't going to go away easy. Isn't going to just secede to Chiesa in the grappling department. I think that would really show us where he's going to be as far as the welterweight division title picture goes.
Yeah, Barberena giving very stern tests to every fighter he faces, whether it's Sage Northcutt, Colby Covington, Leon Edwards. He's had glimpses of greatness against all three of those really tough competitors there. Had some big wins in the octagon too. So Barberena, Michael Chiesa, great matchup. Sign me up. Now another 170-pound fight here. Paul Felder moving up because of the late notice scratch in his fight with James Vick. He now goes up to 170 pounds to take on Mike Perry. Mike Perry, platinum, walks away with the win here. Do you like a rematch, or I'm sorry, a rebooking with Yancy Medeiros, his original opponent? A lot of folks on Twitter and online think that that's the next fight for Perry. I want your take on that, and if you like something better, who do you like?
Yeah, Max, you actually kind of read my mind. I think the next move for Perry is to rebook that Yancy Medeiros. That fight was, in my opinion, going to run away with fight of the night or knockout of the night honors. It was one of the best matchups that's possible in the welterweight division. Two guys that just come and they just absolutely bring it. That's fight of the year caliber fight, and I see no reason why they shouldn't rebook that matchup. Considering Mike Perry probably didn't move up too far up the rankings, given he beat a lightweight. It was a great fight. Paul Felder is a great fighter, but I don't think he's going to get any top 15 considerations coming off of that one. So I say, yeah, rebook that Yancy fight.
Yeah, I originally had slated for Alex Cowboy Oliveira, but you make a really good point. He does beat a 155-pounder. He did have a loss to an unranked fighter in Max Griffin right before this, so maybe he doesn't get a ranked opponent like an Alex Cowboy Oliveira. I'll throw a different name out there, although I would love to see the Yancy Medeiros fight. Iliezu Zaleski dos Santos out of Brazil on an absolute tear. I believe he has won 5 in a row, coming off a big first-round knockout over Sean Strickland in May. Really a fan favorite type of style. Another type where would definitely produce fireworks locked in a cage with Mike Perry for sure.
I like that fight a lot.
Now his opponent, Paul Felder, tough decision loss here, really took a lot of damage, as did Perry. So expect kind of a little bit of a lengthy medical suspension for Felder. I would assume he's headed back to 155 as this fight was originally slated for him to fight James Vick. And once James Vick went to take the main event slot against Justin Gaethje, now he jumps up to 170 pounds. Let's just assume Felder's back at 155. He's still, I believe, he's been bumped from the rankings at 155 pounds. So who do you like for Paul Felder next?
Yeah, Paul Felder. Hey, I give it up to the guy for going to 170. Relatively short notice to fight Mike Perry. A fight I like next for him, 2 fights I like next. Actually, I wrote 2 down. He got bumped from the rankings at 155, but there's just a slew of guys at 155 that are kind of right on that bubble mark, almost top 15 guys. So the 2 matchups I like for him next are 2 bubble guys in Gregor Gillespie and David Tamer. 2 guys that are right in the conversation right there to be top 15 guys. I think a win over Paul Felder for either of them moves them into the top 15, and if Paul Felder can beat either of them, he'll be back in the top 15.
Yeah, boy, I like both those matchups. Gregor Gillespie, he's due for a big test. David Tamer has really put together a nice win streak in the UFC. That matchup sounds like it makes a whole lot of sense, especially sitting right outside the top 15. Just for the purpose of the demo, I'll give you another name. Bobby King Green, coming off a big win in January over Eric Koch. A lot thought he should be ranked after that fight, which although, it's just coming off a draw and a win, not sure if that makes a whole lot of sense, but I'll go Bobby King Green against Paul Felder. Winner of that fight really moves up the rankings at 155 pounds.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Bobby Green. He's had a lot of trouble with injuries throughout his UFC career, but I firmly believe that when healthy and when his mind is right, he can be a top 15 fighter. That's a great fight, Max.
Another lightweight that made a splash, headlining the UFC Fight Pass prelims early in the night. Dan the Hangman Hooker picking up another huge win, his 4th straight, a first-round knockout over the surging Gilbert Burns out of Hard Knocks 365. Dan Hooker really has seemed to figure things out at 155 pounds, enters the UFC rankings at 14. The name I had for Dan Hooker was Mairbek Taisimov. This was prior to me seeing that he is now in the rankings, but Mairbek Taisimov has been having quite a bit of visa issues and unable to fight on American soil. But word is he will be on the UFC Moscow card in the fall. Dan Hooker is ready to go. I would love to see those two go to war and really establish themselves towards the back end of the rankings at 155 pounds. Now that he is in the rankings, though, Jordan, do you have somebody different?
Yeah, and to continue on with that Mairbek Taisimov fight, man, there's probably not a scarier fighter at 155 than Mairbek Taisimov when he can actually get a fight. But as far as Dan Hooker, yeah, like you said, he entered the top 15. The fight I have for him would be the winner between Alex Hernandez and Olivier Aubin-Mercier. I like that fight a lot. It makes sense as 2 guys who are top 15 fighters, but a lot of we could also consider them bubble guys. They're right on the edge of top 15 and just right outside of it. So I think he should fight the winner of that fight. It's happening this month, I believe, in Canada. So I think they could fight towards the end of the year, if not early 2019.
Yeah, 2 weeks, UFC Calgary. That's a great lightweight fight between Olivier Aubin-Mercier and Dan Hooker. Looking forward to that one as well. Moving along here, we got the man at 135 pounds who seems to be forgotten about. Rafael Assunção picks up yet another win. This is a guy who's got wins over Marlon Moraes. He's got a win over TJ Dillashaw. His only loss within his last, I believe, 9 fights is against TJ Dillashaw. Who do you got for Rafael Assunção, who sits at number 3 in the rankings and really just can't seem to get a high-profile fight?
Yeah, Max Rafael Assunção, I feel for the guy, man. He's one of the best fighters at bantamweight right now. He has a stellar record in that division. Has only lost once. Um, but yet I still don't have him getting a title shot against the winner of Dillashaw versus Garbrandt, based solely off of the fact that Marlon Moraes finished Jimmy Rivera in spectacular fashion. And I truly believed that if he was going to get that title shot over Marlon Moraes, he was going to have to come in and really put a beat down on Rob Font. He looked good, but he didn't capitalize on the opportunity that was in front of him. And for that, I think he needs to fight Dominic Cruz next. And if he wins that decision, finish, whatever it may be, if he beats Dominic Cruz, there's no way he's not next for a title shot following Marlon Moraes.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to see Rafael Assunção get a big opportunity and fight Dominic Cruz. Now, at Dominic Cruz's age and his name, it's hard to imagine he would take a fight like that. I know he's turned down Assunção multiple times now. Really, it seems like his only option at this point might be John Lineker, unless Cody Garbrandt is able, or I'm sorry, unless TJ Dillashaw is able to retain his title against Cody Garbrandt later this summer at UFC 227, then maybe a fight with Cody Garbrandt, but that's a lot of what ifs. I'd say match him up with John Lineker and see how that goes. Win, lose, or draw. Rafael Assunção, man, it's you got to feel for the guy. He has put together a very nice streak, and yet he seems to be the guy forgotten about at 135 pounds. Now, last fight I want to touch on before we go, and I know we briefly mentioned Paulo Borrachinha Acosta, but he picks up another win, a surging guy in the middleweight division. He moves, I believe, to number 8, is it, in the middleweight rankings? Yes, number 8 in the middleweight rankings. What do you got for Borrachinha?
Yeah, with Paulo Costa, I think it's time, man. I think it's time he gets plunged into the middleweight elite and just kind of throw him in there and see how he does. He's had a little bit of back and forth with Chris Weidman. I know that's a fight he's looking for. I think he mentioned the UFC is interested in booking that fight for UFC 230, I believe, which is a New York card, a big MSG card. I'd love to see that fight. A lot of the guys might think that's too much too soon for Paulo Costa, but man, what more does he have to do to get that elite name, to get that guy that's going to propel him into title shot conversations? I think Chris Weidman, it's hard to tell with Chris Weidman. He has his fair share of injuries. He's had some losses as of recent. He has that win over Kelvin Gastelum, but other than that, not much has gone right for Chris Weidman lately. I think this would be a good, I think this would be a good opportunity to see if Chris Weidman is still a title contender. And if he loses to Paulo Costa, it might be time to start thinking about, man, are Chris Weidman's best days behind him? But it's a great opportunity for Costa.
Yeah, and now Weidman going on a year of inactivity after that Kelvin Gastelum fight. Now you look at the middleweight rankings, Yoel Romero and Luke Rockhold pretty much guaranteed to move up to the 205-pound weight class. Then you got Chris Weidman. Kelvin Gastelum has already been announced to get the next title shot at middleweight champion Robert Whittaker. Behind him, you got Derek Brunson and David Branch and Jacare Souza. Read that backwards. Jacare Souza, Brunson, Branch. I love the David Branch, Jacare Souza matchup. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. That leaves Weidman, Brunson open, depending on the severity of Brunson's injury. And then behind him, you got Adesanya Tavares and Antonio Carlos Jr. It really makes a lot of sense. And Chris Weidman in that New York Madison Square Garden card, I believe, really packed the house there and kind of sink or swim for Borrachinha. And I don't think a loss to Chris Weidman there really hurts his stock all that much. And young guy, he has a lot of upside there. A loss there just would kind of help build the opportunity and help him learn from his mistake. And like you said, a great test for Chris Weidman, whether he still has a second championship run in him. Absolutely. Now, Borrachinha getting the win over Uriah Hall, stumbles down to number 12 in the rankings, although if we're being honest, I don't know if Uriah Hall really deserves to be in the rankings anymore. What do you think Uriah Hall's next step is?
Yeah, I don't think Uriah Hall deserves to be in the rankings right now. I think he's closer to being cut than he is to being a top 15 fighter right now. But like it or not, I think he's going to be in the UFC. He produces exciting fights no matter who he's up against. I like fighting against Tim Boesch, a fighter who's definitely in the twilight of his career, actually, I should say. He's had some good wins recently. He beat Johnny Hendricks, very, very good fight against Johnny Hendricks. Yeah, I think that's a good fight next to see Hall with a loss there to Boesch, maybe out of the UFC. And Boesch, win or loss, could be retiring here pretty soon.
Yeah, Boesch has had some ups and downs, but he's still very much a competitive fighter in that 185-pound division. I don't agree. Yeah, I agree with you that I don't believe he is a top 15 fighter at this point in time. One fight I guess could make sense is Elias Theodoro. He appears to be unbooked right now, coming off a win against Trevor Smith. And, just whether or not Elias Theodoro can actually propel himself to further out, that 14-15 range, and whether he can really put together a nice win streak or anything of that nature. Another fight comes to mind is Marvin Vettori. I know he took a loss in his last outing, but definitely a game fighter, a guy willing to come forward and exchange on the feet, and could be a fun fight with Uriah Hall.
I like both of those.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it. Really appreciate the time, Jordan. As always, you can find the MMA Today podcast network on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and wherever podcasts are found. Please follow them on Twitter at MMA Today Pods. Also follow MMA Today at MMA Today News and MMA-today.com. Jordan, let the people know where you can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Max. You can find me at J Colbert MMA on Twitter. That's where I post all my content. More matchmaking stuff to come. I really enjoyed this, man.
Yeah, this was great. And I will reiterate, Jordan's got some great content and a wide variety of different types of content, pulling triple duty these days. MMA Today, Sherdog.com, and BJPenn.com. A lot of wide variety of fight announcements, opinion pieces, the matchmaking spot on here. Really have enjoyed having you on. You can find me, Max Freedman, at Trademark MMA. All my content's on MMAtoday.com. Got a couple interviews coming up soon. And then, as always, some appearances on podcasts and the Monday morning matchmaker column too. Jordan, it's been fun. Looking forward to doing this again soon. We'll talk again soon, my man.
Thanks so much, Max. See you next time.